Our next reader is Doug Kiburz, and I hardly know where to start to give an introduction to Doug Kiburz. And I know that once I get started, I won't know where to stop because there's simply so much to say. He lists, he's not an SFCC student per se, but he has taken some short courses, and he lists those for me, and I'm intrigued that he's taken ballroom dancing and Tai Chi. And I'm imaging here and kind of imagining what would happen if maybe those would become confused. He also took a keyboarding class, some computer skill class, and a poetry and photography combination class with Faith several years ago, as did I. And anybody else? Yeah, these gals did that. Yeah, so we were all together several years ago there. Important to say tonight, I think, is that Doug has worked with Dr. Anderson here at the college the past 2 years in setting up the AFS International College Student Program. Formerly, only high school students were in that program, and now SFCC is the only community college in the Midwest to have an AFS student. The others are on the coasts. And so later tonight after intermission, you'll be privileged to hear the music of the current AFS student that is living with the Kiburz family, Julie. She's going to be our musician right after intermission, and so I know that you'll look forward to hearing her. So it's great that Doug is interested in AFS. He was an exchange student himself in Denmark. He and his family have housed 5 international exchange students over the years. And so I think that's just a super great thing that Doug brings to our group. He's from Nebraska, went to medical school there, has practiced medicine here in Sedalia over 30 years. He's an orthopedic surgeon, as most of you know. He's married to Connie. He has 2 daughters, Alice and Beth. And he was a member of the committee who put the Trails End monument there at the intersection of Route Y and 65 Highway. Monument was dedicated last April, and he was instrumental in having Sedalia commemorated as a railhead for the cattle drives from Texas in the 19th century. Doug has a little art company he calls Cave Folk Creations. He says the business of that art company is to torture welding cable into trees. And probably his biggest claim to fame is what he saves for last. He's the prime manure spreader on Maple Leaf Meadows Ranch. So, Doug has been a Spofest favorite since our inception nearly 5 years ago. He's been a regular reader and a favorite and a staunch supporter. We can't thank him enough. And I'm proud to introduce Doug Kiburz to read for you this evening.
Thank you, Debbie. As we are in an academic setting, I would like to add one little thing. In grade school, I was president of my first grade class, 2 years running. A story, a poem, and a jingle, page 1. It was 1814, Indonesia, 9,000 feet above the ocean was Mount Tambora. When it erupted, it was the greatest volcanic eruption in the history of the planet Earth. 100,000 souls perished. Enough volcanic ash went up in the air, it changed the climate and all weather around the world for 2 years. There were some unusual consequences. At that time, there was a small group of friends and lovers traveling throughout Europe. They stopped in Switzerland, and all of their outdoor plans were ruined by the horrific weather. So their host suggested that they retire to their rooms and all write a story and bring it back, and they would read it for their entertainment since their plans were ruined from being outside. Mary Wollstonecraft was traveling with her lover Percy at the time, and she had no idea of a storyline. Classic writer's block. Nada, zippo, nothing, niet. Then, one evening she had a fit of creativity and inspiration, and she wrote her story. And Mary would later marry Percy, and his name was Shelley, and that made her Mary Shelley, and her little story was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Now, why am I telling you this? She wrote this when she was 18 years of age. And many of our college contributors are 18, so if you ask me, Can an 18-year-old contribute to classic literature? The answer is yes. So, meanwhile, Baron von Drees in Germany was in a pickle. During this same volcanic winter, terrible weather, the famine of a century was going on. Usually he took care of the Duke's land. He looked for poachers, rode his horse, made his rounds. The horses were dead or famished, and so he had no way to get around. But necessity is the mother of invention, and so he took a child's toy, a hobby horse, put wheels on it, and he walked along to make his rounds. He called it a walking machine. Later, someone put pedals on it to propel it. It was the invention of the bicycle, one of the greatest inventions in the history of mankind. We'll go on that later. Humans being what they were, they wanted to go farther and faster, so they made the wheel bigger and bigger, limited only by the length of their leg. They made the high wheel bicycle. One of the greatest socioeconomic changes ever. And if you don't believe so, Susan B. Anthony, they asked her, what do you think of the bicycle, the great suffragette? She said, the bicycle has done more to emancipate women than anything else in the world. I stand and rejoice every time I see a woman ride on a wheel. Philosopher said, when man invented the bicycle, he reached the peak of his attainment. Morley said, the bicycle should be the vehicle of poets and novelists. H.G. Wells said, utopia will have bicycle tracks all around. And our own Mark Twain said, you should learn to ride a bike. You will never regret it if you live. And therein lies the rub. The transition from the horse to the bicycle was not always that smooth. Page 2. I admit, I'm no bronc rider, horse whisperer, or Texas Ranger. Whether you mount, lead, or load a horse, there is an element of danger. Now, I'd been buying, selling, hauling horses for 30 years or so. Some were a buy, some were a bust, as they would come and go. My wife and daughters, they could ride and sit a fancy seat. I horse showed some and smiled with grace whenever I got beat. Now, we'd ridden through the mountains, in the ocean, and on the rail. There was something about a girl and horse, in the ring or on the trail. No, I held my own in the saddle, no greenhorn, you might say. Fixed some fence, spread manure, and stacked up bales of hay. We'd ridden all kinds of weather, even in foreign lands. I'd been buck clean off a gelding that stood up 16 hands. Suffice to say, I'll never make the Cowboy Hall of Fame. Scoop and poop and scribbling poems is really more my game. So I was not averse to risk in any kind of tussle till I had a call from that old judge, Robert Russell. He had an antique bike with one huge and one small wheel. He'd ridden it himself and said, it's no big deal. But now he was aging and getting longer in the tooth. You take this wheel and ride it, piece of cake, and that's the truth. Now, I'd ridden bikes since I was 4. To first grade, I rode a mile. I've ridden through Yellowstone, round Cape Cod, and around Whidbey Isle. I'd ridden the Canadian Rockies and up the California coast. I'd ridden all over Denmark, liked riding there the most. So when Bob gave me that penny farthing, that gave me a grin. Why, I'd mount that old contraption and I'd take it for a spin. You don't need a rope and spurs, no saddle, reins, or lead. From what I saw, you just need balance, some poise, and a little speed. I had not paid much attention to old wheelmen on the run, but how hard could it be? They sure seemed to be having fun. Now I stood right behind it. The wheel seemed mighty high. When the crowd standing around, I said, well, it's time for my try. I set my foot and grabbed the bar and counted down from 10. I don't fully recall exactly just what happened to me then. I made the mount, I rang the bell, and I hit the pedals running. I don't mind saying that at first I looked quite stunning. The crowd was whooping and hollering, say, "Yee-haw! You ride 'em, boy!" Probably seemed like it was just riding an overgrown boy's toy. I tried to make a turn and the wheel ground down my shin. It ripped a piece of hide and left a hole where I'd had skin. I'd pulled back on the handlebar, but the wheel refused to slow. My buds thought I was riding rough and screamed, "You go, man, go!" I started down the hill, gaining speed as along I went. The crowd got their money's worth, yep, each and every cent. I reached top speed, my hat and hair and pedals were a-flying. I dodged 3 trees, a plow, and by the lane one cement lion. A split-second thought was about the aforementioned judge. I thought that we were friends, but I guess he held some grudge. I hit the ditch and caught free air. For a second I was in space. It seemed like in slow motion my life flashed before my face. There was grinding, there was smashing, then all was deadly still. I tried to move a leg and open up one eye against my will. I thought I'd lost an arm, but it was underwater in the lake. I wished I'd had Fred Flintstone feet to fashion me a break. Chipped a tooth, blew a shoe, my watch and glasses were long lost. I rode at least 8 seconds, but not sure it's worth the cost. The little wheel was missing, the bike's backbone, it was cracked. If I'd been playing football, I'd been blitzed, bull rushed, and sacked. The seat was pointing backwards. Mud and grass were in my hair. One ear was gently dangling. There were spokes most everywhere. The ground soaked up my blood, but I had no breath with which to curse. Was it the bucking horse or the bucking bike that left me worse? The crowd had gathered round me. I saw stars up in the sky. Like getting back on a horse, I said, let's give her one more try. Now, cowboy poetry starts off kind of slow, and then it just sort of peters out altogether. And I'd like to finish with this little bit. And it's kind of obligatory, I think, because for several reasons. It's a favorite collegiate pastime of enjoying a libation or two. It has a farm animal in it, so naturally it kind of lends itself to cowboy poetry. It does fall in line with the current Greco-Roman calendar. It has some kind of a connection to reverse osmosis, and my father always said, surround yourself with quality people. And lastly, it has continuity, because at last Spofest, people heard one of my mother's favorite drinking songs. I didn't say they enjoyed it, I just said they heard it. And so it goes something like this. 'Twas late last November, as well as I remember, I was walking down the street in drunken pride, when my feet began to stutter, and I lay down in the gutter, and a pig came up and lay down by my side. Oh, I warbled it's fair weather when good fellas get together, when a lady passing by was heard to say, you can tell a man that boozes by the company he chooses. And the pig got up and slowly walked away. Well, may all of us maintain our thirst and hunger for knowledge, and may all of us be students for life.